Courting Your Soul with Rhonda Grant.
I'd like to welcome to the show today, Danielle Bouthillier.
Thank you for having me.
Danielle, you're welcome. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what has inspired you to write this delicious novel?
Well, I'm from the Maritimes. I work at actually the largest hospital in the Maritimes. I work as a medical laboratory technician, also known as medical laboratory technologist. I'm also known as a histotechnologist.
Okay.
And my primary work is we take tissue samples and we make them into microscope slides. And then that's given to the doctor for diagnosis and prognosis, mostly for cancers, but for other diseases as well, and inflammation. And I've been writing since I've been in university, mostly short stories. It started actually when I was in 6th grade, and I got a short story published in a children's book. And that gave me the dream and goal to one day publish a full novel.
Wonderful. What inspired you to write your new novel?
Or this novel would have been many years ago when I was in university. Normally I do art on the computer, but my tablet broke at that time, and I was sort of with a computer, basic student computer with Word and PowerPoint and so forth. So I started to get into creative writing and mostly short stories. And this was this was a short story that got out of hand. So originally it was supposed to be a short story, but once 3 years later and I was done with it, it was over 100,000 words.
Beautiful.
The actual inspiration came from one night I came home from university. Now, of course, it's pre-medical sciences, so it's a long 12-day stretch. Came home, and of course, to save money, I was living with family at the time. I was relaxing. I was watching cartoons. I was watching, it's called The New Adventures of Superman from the 60s, just to wind down for bed. I had a family member come into the living room, and then she accused Superman of being evil, and it shocked me. I was like, oh my goodness, one of the greatest superheroes of all times. She didn't realize that, he just saved a city and lots of people. But at the same time, it didn't surprise me because she's a very bitter and angry person. And then several things came to mind is if I was watching like live television news and I was at school all day and I just learned that, there was a superhero to save the world, would she still say all those negative comments about him? And then if he actually saved her life, would she say all those bad and negative things to his face? And then it's sort of like, okay, the cartoon character, comic book character, he technically had a good life. He was adopted by a loving farm couple. What instead he was adopted by my grandparents, what would happen? So, of course, this went through many drafts. That was the original idea for the short story. And then it got revised, and then it became something different. But it still has those remnants of what that original short story was supposed to be.
Wonderful. Very exciting. And so what point was it where you thought to yourself, I've got something here, like I would like to publish this? Was this during the writing, or was it when you finished it? Or when did that come to you that you should publish this book?
Took me about 3 years to actually complete it. Again, it took a long time, and then it got revised a few times. I posted snippets and chapters online, and I got some feedback so I can go back and make the edits and revisions that I needed. And unfortunately, it sat on the shelf when I went to college to become an MLT. And then the pandemic happened, and I was still working at the time, but it was a little bit on the bored side. So I decided to clean out my computer, like all the files, came across this file, and I was like, I was more looking for feedback. Before the pandemic, you would have to print maybe 5 to 20 manuscripts and mail it to the companies for review. And then everything became online. So it's fill out this form and submit your PDF file of the manuscript. So it became more easier. And sometimes there'll be a comment section. I said, I'm looking for feedback, any revisions or any editorial notes. That was more what I was fishing around for. Because the publication company would say, we like this, but we want you to change this, and I could go back and make those revisions. Surprisingly, the feedback was very positive, and I actually got 5 offers on the book.
Excellent. A writer's dream.
So technically just by accident, sort of.
So what happened after that, Danielle? Once you had submitted it and received the offers, where did the process take you after that?
Well, of course, the offers, they come with a usually a contract.
Yes.
And I read all the fine print, so I had to go through it one by one, see which ones I liked. And eventually with this company, what I learned was when I was submitting my manuscripts for reviews, the American publication companies like this superhero genre more than the Canadian companies.
Right.
So I sort of more gravitated towards the American publishing companies. And I know the US has a bigger audience and they love superhero genre. And this one also, they're trying to get the book into Canada. I was told last summer it was actually accepted in the Chapters Indigo. But I'm still waiting to hear feedback on that.
Well, it's very exciting. And not only that, but you also won an award. Let the audience know about the award that you won for this book.
It's called the Plume Award for Literary Excellence. And it's for, mostly it's a book with a unique writing style. I think I have a unique writing style because I never went to creative writing classes. Looking back, maybe I should have took some in university, but because of that, it's so unique. I compare it to art sometimes because I'm also an artist. You can tell if someone's been to a university because they can copy someone else's style, but they don't have their own style of writing.
Oh.
So this is what the award is this is very unique writing. And it should be awarded apparently. Very creative. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. It's very creative writing. Yeah.
It is creative, and it's hard to stop reading your book once you get started. I mean, it's so interesting, and there's not a lot of fluff there. I mean, it just moves along at a really good pace, and I've really enjoyed it. So, during the pandemic, a lot of people who had time on their hands would go to pen and paper. And I know that my book, for instance, that's what I was up to when I wrote my book. It was during the pandemic. And I knew that I would write the book that I wrote. I just needed the time to craft it and have that time to be able to just explore more what I wanted to do and how I wanted to publish the book that I have. So tell me, how did it feel to you when the publishing date or the release date of the book happened? How did that feel? I know how it felt for me, but how did it feel for you?
Probably a mix of excitement and nervousness.
Yes.
Because it's almost like showing someone your new artwork. You really want them to actually enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was so nervous with mine that I almost published under a pen name. And it wasn't until around a month before it published that I decided to take ownership of my own body of work. But I was really nervous when I posted it on Facebook and was so over the moon about the response from people and the purchases that happened immediately. And so I just say to all authors out there, all budding, inspiring authors, just to keep going forward because it's such a wonderful experience, isn't it?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yes. Is that the advice that you would give young authors?
It's like to never give up. I actually had a friend who wrote screenplays and wanted me to review his screenplay. And I was able to give him constructive feedback, but I said, don't give up. Just keep going with it. Like, this might be your first draft, but your fourth draft's going to get even better. Or you can take some ideas from the story and make a new story out of it, and it'll be better than this one. But yes, it's be persistent. I was persistent with this one novel because it took initially 3 years for the first draft. You mentioned previously it's sort of fast paced. That's because I was informed to remove some of the fluff scenes. There were so many cute and fluffy scenes that I really wanted it into the book. Maybe in the future, if I do an author's edition, I'll put all the deleted scenes in there. But looking back, it might have been a good choice that I got rid of some of the fluff scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what are your plans? Like, have you started to write a new book? Or are you just letting this one settle in?
I have. Actually, in university as well, I wrote a fantasy, it would be a novelette.
Okay.
And actually, I got good reviews on that one. And there is I had 2 other science fiction novels, slowly getting to work on that one. For this current book, I would like to do an author's edition. If this one is popular, then I can re-release it as an author's edition and have all the extra scenes. Mm-hmm. And I can put a disclaimer saying this is what the original was supposed to read like. Mm-hmm. And hopefully it answers some questions if any readers have any questions about the story. I have also another novelette, and it's also fantasy, because I usually gravitate towards science fiction and fantasy. Hopefully I can use those 2 fantasy novelettes would be published next. And then 2 other stories I'm working on would be later in the future, or in the near future, hopefully.
So where does your inspiration come from? Do you dream inspiration? Do you dream characters? Where does your inspiration come from when you develop and describe a character?
The novelette that's fantasy that I mentioned previously, actually, both of those are from dreams.
Yes.
So yes, the trick is you have to have a little pad and paper next to your bedstand. When you wake up, you just write a sentence, mm-hmm. and you don't have to write down the whole entire dream sequence, or write down a little sentence of what you saw and who you met, or what characters were in your dream, and then you can go to work or go to school. And then you can come back in the evening, see the note, and then you immediately remember your dream. Because if you don't write it down, you're not going to remember it later in the day.
That's right.
Yeah. The other one was, I was told with characters, it's better to base characters off of people you've met in real life. So my example in my novel is the twist villain is actually based off of the family member who accused Superman of being evil. So you can make that comparison right there.
Mm-hmm. And so do you dream a lot? Like, do you have dreams? Like, do you, before you go to sleep, say, I want to dream about my upcoming novel? Or do you give any instruction? Or does it just come to you and you remember and you write it down in the morning?
I have a pretty busy schedule, and I do night shifts as well. So sometimes my sleep schedule is a little bit off.
Right.
Or you have a hard day at work and you just collapse in the bed. So I don't recall ever going to sleep and imagining a dream, mm-hmm. or if I'm tired, I just go to bed and then wake up. Maybe there's no dreams, but if you do get a dream, it's pretty vivid.
Yes, it's pretty vivid. In color?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Years ago, as a musician, I dreamed a song and it woke me up and it was so good. I thought, this is going to be great. Fell back to sleep. And somebody else has that song because I could not remember it in the morning. So it's critical. Well, as we know, everyone dreams, or even if we don't remember dreams, I don't seem to remember them as much anymore. But there's a small percentage that will take dreams and then flush that out and develop a character from that. I mean, what you're doing is ingenious, really. I've talked to other writers that they do the same thing, that they dream characters and then they just build them out and build them into scenes in their book. It's almost like genius level, really. It's almost like you're getting information from another source, and that is helping you become a really great author. So that is really interesting. You're listening to Courting Your Soul with Rhonda Grant, whose podcast has been treated with digital audio health by my sponsor, Symatrex. And today I have the great pleasure of interviewing Danielle. I'm going to have her pronounce her last name for us and let the audience know, Danielle, where they may purchase your book.
So for my last name, this is sort of funny. There's several variations depending on where you live. So it's Bouthillier is the French version, like if you're in Quebec. There's Bouthillier is the English version. That's what my father and mother usually say. And in Cape Breton, it's Bouthillier.
Okay.
So it's different variations. I'm not fussy. I'll take them all.
Yes.
But I've been gravitating towards Bouthillier recently.
I really like Bouthillier. It sounds nice when you say it. You feel nice when you say that.
That's that little French accent at the end makes it fancy.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry. So for books, we have the Writers Republic website. We have Amazon. There is Barnes and Noble. And I was informed that it should be in Chapters Indigo, either on their website or in the bookstores really soon.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so I like to ask my guests if they feel that they've been called or crafted their journey or a bit of both. And I mean, you work in a very fast-paced world with medicine. There's always deadlines, right? When you're having to analyze tissue samples and things like that, because doctors need to know and patients need to know pretty well right away, right? Especially if cancer is involved, because treatment can happen really quickly. But I've lost my train of thought. I need a second here. So do you feel that you've been called or crafted to the work that you've done and also to the writing that you're involved with?
Do you mean like a calling to write and become a writer?
Yeah, like sort of an inkling in yourself to continue with the writing. Or sometimes when people are young, they say, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a writer. And sometimes they feel it early in their life that they would like to do something when they're older. And when they're older, they actually do that thing.
Oh, yes. I'm going to have to say yes for that one.
Yes.
Actually, I wanted to be a Disney animator when I was very young because of the Disney Renaissance.
Yes.
But I had some cousins who were starving artists, so I was sort of shifted away from that. And then my parents got satellite TV, and they used to be called the Discovery Health Channel, and it would actually show surgeries on TV. So my mother remembers me eating popcorn while they're showing surgeries on TV.
I know.
And I was
That's
like,
a true medical person if you can do that.
I was like, well, I want to do that someday. Of course, it always flip-flop what doctor I wanted to be. I want to be a heart doctor or,
Yes.
OBGYN doctor. And then, of course, had to get through junior high and high school. And then I got the Bachelor of Science. Unfortunately, I couldn't get into the nearby medical school. But this was my second option, was the laboratory technologist. And I'm actually still I really enjoyed this work. So this is, even though I didn't get to become a doctor, I might become a doctor in the future.
Oh, yes.
Or I might just stay put where I am because this work is very enjoyable and the people are excellent.
Yes.
The pathologists are all nice as well. And for writing, interestingly, I have some family members who always wanted to publish and write a book, and some of them are also writers. And when I was in grade 6, I didn't see myself strong in English, but there was an assignment to write a short story, and then the prize was it could be published into a children's book. So to everyone's surprise, my short story was selected. So it gave me an inkling, like, I would like to publish books someday and become a full-time writer. But it wouldn't reemerge until years later when I broke my drawing tablet, and then I was reintroduced into writing. And I'll probably keep going at it for some years.
Wonderful. That's just wonderful. I love hearing about people's backgrounds and how they ended up becoming who they are. And so art and medicine really does go together. I think it's the same side of the brain that's used for that. What extraordinary experience have you found in your life? And that would mean something that you weren't really looking for or thinking about, and then it just sort of happened. Can I give you an example?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I was an avid horseback rider. I'm a writer too, but a horseback rider. And I was without a horse, and so I rode other people's horses and competed other people's horses. And I didn't have a whole lot of money, and I moved to the Toronto area, and I hung around the stable. And this vet said to me, "Do you have a horse?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't have a horse." I said, "My friend does." And he said he knew where a horse was if I wanted to go take a look at it. And I couldn't afford a horse. But he said, "I think you can get it fairly cheaply." And so I went with my friend, and we saw 2 horses, and I definitely wanted that horse. So talented. And my friend wanted the other one, and she had an injury on a foot. Anyway, this horse, I bought it, and I received her papers in the mail, and her father was Abdullah, and Abdullah was the champion in the 1983 or 4 Olympic, and he won silver. He won gold. His team won silver overall. So this found out after I bought her that she came from a famous bloodline. So that to me is an extraordinary experience. Now, I have lots of smaller extraordinary experiences as well, but that one does come to mind. So that would be an example. I just like to ask my guests, and probably after we get off the show, you'll probably say, "Oh, that was my extraordinary discovery." But some people just say a word, and they found that the word was an extraordinary experience because they had to look it up and find the meaning, and it actually changed their life or changed the quality of who they were as a person. So we've talked a little bit about your background. And we've talked about your book that you have now, Hero, and also we've talked about your novelettes that you have coming up as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I have a few notes here. Let me see.
Sure.
Oh, there's one here. It's a quick little note. It's, what do you personally enjoy about writing? Mm-hmm. What I was taught in university is it's a constructive outlet to relieve stress, and by making the characters and settings that may not exist, but then you can create the outcome and you can control what the characters are going to say and what they're doing, what's going to end. It's more better than, exercising is also a good constructive outlet for stress. So that's actually probably one of the reasons why I started writing. Since I couldn't do art on the computer anymore, maybe that's why I gravitated towards doing short stories. Because once the short story was done, it felt satisfying, and I got all my emotions and feelings out on paper. Or if you're angry at someone, write it all down and walk away.
And do you ever, when you're driving to work or walking to work or however you go to work, do you ever think about great scenarios and then have to hurry up and write it down as soon as you get home or get to your place of work?
It's happened a few times. You have to, again, keep a little notebook in your pocket there. Luckily enough, I work in a place where there's pens and paper everywhere.
So. It's all over the place.
I did a night shift one time, and an idea popped in mind, and luckily enough there's a little sticky note.
Yes. Perfect.
Jot down some ideas and then stuffed it in my pocket. The next day doing laundry, found it in my pocket. I go, "Oh yeah, now I got to bring this up to my work computer and start working on it."
Right. Yeah. I know, because inspiration doesn't matter what you're doing or where you are. I mean, if it's there, it's there. I've lost a lot of things by not having a pen and piece of paper with me to write, just jot something down, as you say. Now, I find with a lot of writers that they will keep a journal. And when they get up in the morning, and I know your sleep schedule is all off, so sometimes morning's night and night's morning, right? Mm-hmm. And they keep a journal, and sometimes things can come out in a journal that they can capture and then repurpose in a novel or in an interview or something like that. Do you have that practice at all, or are you just a jotter when something comes to you?
I've never written journals before, or diaries or nothing like that. I'm mostly just observing and then taking notes.
Right.
I saw, actually, it was a docudrama about Charles Dickens and how he came up with the Christmas Carol. And actually, that was one of the plot points. He had a little notebook in his pocket.
Yes.
And he met a butler. I think it was Marley. So you see him writing down the name. And his friend's like, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's a writer."
He was acting like a detective, but he was really a writer. Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, so you're spending time just observing and then recording that if you can use it in a script. So with Hero, I just want to go back to that because I've really enjoyed the reading that I've done of your book. How did that character come into play for you?
Actually, originally in the first draft, the superhero was supposed to be a guy.
Uh-huh.
And then the feedback I got was it's very it's sort of predictable and stereotypic. And then on the other side, and at the time I was crazy for superheroes, and they came out with a bunch of different Marvel movies. An Iron Man movie came out, I think, around that time.
Uh-huh.
And I realized there are female superheroes, but I couldn't really relate to them. Either they didn't have interesting backstory or they're just too darn pretty. I couldn't relate to that. So it's like, I would like maybe a more relatable female character with female problems and maybe low self-esteem, a little bit of poor body image. And actually, once I changed the character from male to female, actually, it made the story more emotional.
Yeah.
So that was actually a feedback I got from like the second draft from, I think it was the second draft from the third draft. And they said once I made the female character, it was a way more emotional story, that was a good change as well.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking about the female character, and would you call it magic? Would you call it shape-shifting or something else, the powers that you endowed her with?
I think the original idea was for the male superhero, it was going to be just super strength or and then maybe a larger size. And then I changed it to the female character. And I was going through the problem with superpowers is it's already nothing new under the sun. It's already been done before. So I was able to print off a list of powers, and it was a really good list. It said the power, what the power does, and who has it. So it was like super strength, define, having ability to lift or carry heavy objects, but very little to no effort. And then, of course, they gave the examples, Superman, Mr. Incredible, Hulk. I was like, okay. So I went through the list and I said, I want mostly non-lethal. So that would be like the force field and the X-ray vision, healing powers. I was like, well, I need something a little bit lethal. So I went with either like the flame or the ice powers. Originally, she was supposed to use those powers for cooking.
Yes.
So that would be handy in the kitchen if you could instantly cook something with supercharged heat. And one of the ideas was she's from another dimension, so that might explain why she's able to walk through walls. That would be the only possible source of doing that. I took a physics course where he actually explained why you can't walk through walls, and I tried to explain it in the book a little bit. But then the family member that accuses the superhero of being a demon, again, she thinks it's magic. It's like, oh, this is magical powers, and magic, all magic is technically evil. So there was I wanted to make it sort of vague. And then, of course, I met someone one time who was adopted and they didn't know their background. So even to this day, they don't know their background. So that's how she's like, is I don't know how I got my powers and I don't know where they came from, but I just have it and I have to live with it and I have to use them for good somehow.
Very interesting. And so they're just powers that she has, and she just uses them because the thing is there's health involved there too, right? Where she's able to heal. So she also has healing power.
Yeah, I find though it was interesting. Not many superheroes have that ability, but where I work, that would be really, really popular.
That would be really popular in your line of work. Yeah,
so that's sort of hinted at the end when she's in the hospital. They can't, and of course her family can't find her. It's like, oh, that's what she's been up to. She's been going around room to room, healing everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a wonderful journey that you take the reader on. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we haven't discussed?
It was in a previous interview. I don't know if it would be appropriate to mention or not. The main character is actually deaf, and I've actually had a few questions. They say, why did you make the main character hard of hearing?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I represented like a person with deafness in a very correct manner, which is surprising. But my response was, I work at a hospital. I pretty much know what a person with disability would probably do and act like. So I could get that pretty realistic. It started with, I wanted the superhero to have a talent. I noticed not many of them, well, besides like science or inventing or maybe they study martial arts. It's like they don't really do anything creative. They don't do any art or music. Originally, I wanted her to play the flute and then the violin, and then it became a guitar. And then I learned that the best musicians are usually hard of hearing. And the other one was some of the best artists are actually visually impaired. So I thought that was an interesting fact. And that's, you have to sort of read between the lines. But the main character is such an excellent and talented musician. So it isn't much of a hindrance to her. But the music she produces is, well beyond what an average person with good hearing can do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think that when with a disability, and you probably know about this, is other senses can be heightened because of it.
Yeah.
And so that ends up being your strength. I know that some of the best speakers are people who had trouble speaking. They either had a lisp or a stutter, and they have had to work and work and work on that craft in order to be able to do it fluently without anybody noticing or making fun, because a lot of kids are cruel in school and a lot make fun, and it ended up being their superpower, right?
Oh yeah.
There's and people who have injuries. I mean, there was a famous, I can't remember his name right now, but there's a famous speaker, and he had an injury where he hurt his head. He fell in school, hurt his head, and it caused problems, and he ended up being an unbelievable inspiration and has schools for children. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because people like me, when I hear what you say, then I have a thought pattern about that and about what I know, and how people are incredible as they can take that injury and they can turn it into their power. So, I mean, your book is just so full of interesting things like this, and it's because of your background that you're able to inject and write about these things. So it's really been a pleasure to have you on the show, and I really wish you a lot of success and a lot of writing, a lot more writing, because you're so fantastic at it. You're very talented in that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you for listening to Courting Your Soul with Rhonda Grant, whose podcast has been treated with digital audio health by my sponsor, Cymatrax. Theme song for Courting Your Soul is Sun on the Water, composed and performed by John Park Wheeler.